Hello, today I'm painting at Mounts Bay.
And it's got a nice gentle sky, just a few areas, it's slightly different colour going through. So I put those on. I'm now going to get a bigger brush and add a warm blue. I'll put all the colours in the description and just go round the marks I've just made, just to make a light sky. It's a lovely area for a walk. There is parking if you want to just sit and admire it from the car at this time of year. So just putting the sky in and going quite carefully round the mount itself. So from that point of view, I'm getting as close as I can, and then I'm going to change to a smaller brush because the stonework is quite a light colour. I'm using cerulean blue and cobalt turquoise. And I'm just going to go round as many of the turrets as I can. Then dry the brush off and move the paint. You can always work back away from it, but to give visual impact it needs a single layer of the stone colour, not on top of the sky.
The best way to draw a stately home like this is to do up and down movements and search for rectangles and triangles, and then just add different colours.
They're all simple shapes that are amalgamated, and there's a little bit of darker paint in the middle there, but I'm going to leave well alone. Just go down to the horizon a bit more here. And then to make it smaller and easier to deal with, I'm going to put the foliage in next and work up from the bottom. And then the shapes that I've got to draw have been reduced. So going in with a gentle green to start with. Just go where it's easy to see. And I'll take some of the green off there because there is a rock face. Just find a lost edge. I can come back to it. So now you can see it's a simpler shape. And again with the houses at the bottom. They're all in a cluster apart from an old dairy that's slightly isolated. So just put the green in away from the houses, which will make them show up more, and then I can come back to them. So it's just one green at the moment, but it's just identified the area. So I'm going to mix a dark colour, which I've mixed out of indigo and yellow ochre. And then I'm just going to add a little bit burnt sienna to it to separate it from the green. Give more visual impact if it's separated. I can drop some darker colour in, so I'm going to use raw umber for a change. Add a little blue to make it darker. And then go back and just drop a few colours in. Quite diluted paint, and the previous layer is still damp. So just find its own route and it will make it look more natural. And making the paint slightly darker still for the little fingers of rock that go out to the surf, because it'll make the white surf show up more. And then a little bit darker again underneath the cottages. And again, that will make them show up a little bit more. The next stage is to put the hillside on, and that's quite distant. And it will make the island, St Michael's Mount, pop forward. So what I'm going to do is tiny bit of paint on the brush and just do a cooler green line just to claim the hillside. And then just add a little bit of yellow ochre without cleaning the brush very much, and just drop it in as a suggestion of fields. And then go back to the darker green again and go round any communities that are showing. Obviously everybody likes a sea view, so the place is dotted with dwellings. But I don't want to make it too dominant. So I'm going to clean the brush and put a waterline in for an area where the sea and the beach meet. Just skipping the brush across and then going back and joining them up, because it's there but it doesn't show very much. And then all the buildings in that area have got slate roofs. And I can leave the white paper for the faces of the building. So all I can do is go in and make little marks. Make them a tiny bit bluer for the next community. And looking at them from some distance away, there's a few things that you can't quite make out. Just put those in. And again, lose the edges. And then the other side, this is slightly nearer, or not so hazy. So I can be slightly bolder, so I'm going to just tint the colours I've just used a little bit more. And starting from the mount, and there are some trees, so I'm just going to go round, leave a few gaps. And there's still the dark line on top, so I'll add some more blue to the paint and do the hillside. And I don't want that to leave a line, so I'm just going to go with some water and lose the bottom edge. And then add some more yellow ochre to the green and just suggest fields. And then come round again. Looks like there's been some quarrying in the area. Got big chunks missing. So that's brought the mount forward and then darker at the bottom. And just merge that together because I'm not too sure where it all starts and finishes. So if I merge it, I can come back. And then I need to warm it up a little bit. Just here. Clumps of growth, and then it looks like a quarry face. So I'll just put in some up and down areas and a few dark areas, and I can come back to that when I'm more sure, but that's given me a background that I can use to put the sea in. And again, that's got a hint of beach, so I'll do a line at the bottom. So now I can put some sea in, but to start with I'm going to put in the harbour wall on the island, because that is quite definite. And I've just mixed nondescript colours to get that. While that's drying, I can do the wall on the other side. These are all done with local stone, so the colours are all very similar. And I'm just going to feather this one off. So I'm not sure where it starts and finishes at the moment. So now the water. It's darker on this side of the bay. It's much shallower here and it's got breaking waves. So this is more turquoisey and green, and this is more darker blue. So I'm going to mix up French ultramarine and a little bit of Viridian, just to give me a different colour, and then go around the area of the rock, taking the brush strokes away. And there is an indication of surf, so just doing a few broken lines. Then I can go back and fill it in. And I want the white surf on the beach to show, so I'm trying to go back over here and make sure there's no paper showing where the brush has skipped, because I don't want to lose the impact that I'd planned. And the same over here. I'll start with the foreshore and then move into open water. And I've got foliage coming off the mount, so I'm just doing jagged edges, not adding any more water, just adding more paint. Cleaning the brush off and drying it, and then just gently moving any paint that needs moving to get a good beach line. And then there's a changing colour in the middle, so I'm just adding more Viridian, and I'm going to drop that in. It's really making the mount stand out now. They're coming forward. I've got three colours. I've got quite almost a navy blue, a greeny blue, and then where the sand and seaweed are being washed up on the beach, I've got a grey green. So I'm going to start with adding a little bit of indigo to the mix and just doing the area from about here outwards. It's just tidal changes where it's sweeping around the island. And then quickly adding a lighter blue and pulling the darker paint forward. And it's quite light on the right hand side. So I'll change to the Cerulean blue. Just merge them all together. Then coming forward, I've got turquoise. Which I'm putting in. I've got an angle on the current. I'm looking at it from a slightly oblique angle, but that might be because it was the only place that I had a good view. Sometimes a tree can thwart your composition. So now I'm going to add Viridian and Naples yellow to make a different green entirely. Then just add a bit of the blue to it, just to change it slightly. And then come in sideways again up to the surf line. Mixing more paint. It's quite useful to keep mixing more paint because the water does change colour. And then going into a very delicate blue. As it's meeting the causeway to the island at that point, so the water's different depths and currents. So now I'm down to the surf, I've just mixed up a slightly different colour for the surf. And I'm just going to go around the little marks I made earlier just to give an indication of where the surf is. Changing brushes to one with a different point. Just giving a suggestion of the foamy effect as the water breaks towards the shore, losing some of it. As I say, there's a change in current now. I'll put the plants on top in a minute. The water's just breaking on the shore very gently. But there's naturally foam where it breaks because it hits the rocks and bounces back again. And then every now and again there's an area of dark further out. I've got the dark available still on my palette, so I'm just going to add that on top a little bit. And then there's hardly any sand and it's quite mucky. It's not golden sand at this point because it's still so wet. It's got a little layer of water on it, so I'm just going down with a sandy colour but not so perfect through the plants as much as I can. If I've gone over the plants, I can clean the paint off with a flat brush, or the green might well cover it. Just giving a suggestion. I'm going to have a go at the actual building now, and I want it to stand out. So I'm mixing Davy's grey and Naples yellow together to start with, just to block in the colours. And I said to you, don't be afraid of these buildings. They're all basically simple shapes that are joined together. So I'm going to start with the tower in the middle and just make a simple rectangle. And having got it in there, just going to make it a tiny bit darker on one side. I'm going in deliberately lightly so that I can be sure of where I'm going. The next thing I'm going to do is a long building that comes out sideways. And then behind it is a darker one because it's in its own shadow. And then that's lighter again as it's facing a different direction and getting the sunlight. I've also got some circular areas that are built to get the best view from the windows, and areas that are recessed behind them so they're naturally a little bit darker. And they obviously want to keep warm. There's lots of chimneys. I'm just bringing that area in the middle down because there's some chimneys there and a tree. So without too much trouble, that's given the indication of the building. I'm just bringing it down to its foundations. And then there's lots of rocks. So I'm just going to mix up a darker colour from what's on my palette. Just a little bit of everything. And drop some stones in. Just try not to get a pattern. You just want vague stones and steps. And having done that, I can move down to the houses and the area of the harbour. There's a causeway that goes out to the mountain. So I'm starting by putting that in. And there's a beach either side of it. So I'll just go at a different angle. And then slightly darker and browner rocks that are around it. So I'm still going in with a little brush on this occasion. And just putting in a curve of beach goes around the causeway. And then there's a darker sea wall where it goes around a corner, so just adding a little bit of darker colour. And it's quite in shadow, so now I've established where it is, I'll just drop some dark in on top. And it doesn't go all the way because then the rest of the wall's catching the sun. Just take it back with the brush to where there's a change in light. And the other side of the harbour wall's in sunshine, so that's showing up nicely. And there's different levels here, so a little bit of the harbour's got some water in coming from the other side, and then the causeway side is higher. So I'm just going to do that at an angle. And then the sand's very wet and there's water showing on it, so it's actually quite purpley. So I'll use my Winsor violet. I'm taking it off the palette lid because it managed to spread itself. I don't want to throw it away, so keeping me company for a few weeks here. That's broken that up nicely. Now the next thing, I've got a few rocks that are sticking out because it's low tide. So I'm going to go back in with some darker brown and indigo and just give an indication of the sweep of the beach. And then a few rocks coming out into the sea, which I'm going to make more brown. I'll just put a wiggle on top of them. And then the water around them will be a different colour. So just show that, and it breaks up the area slightly. Now moving back to the buildings, they've all got lichen on and they're mostly slate, but the lichen makes the roofs look yellow. So I'm using Payne's grey. I'm just going to stick a roof on, not worrying about any windows or anything at the moment. Just stick the roof on. And anything else that I can see that's easy. And then I can put other buildings on top. Now there's a wall and this house is defensively placed behind it. And some are going different directions. So I'm just doing anything that I can find that's easy. Then I'll come back to the rest. Now I've got a wall that's quite dark because it's partly in shade. So I'm going to stick that in, and then I'll come back to the other buildings in a minute when it's had a chance to dry, because otherwise they'll all merge into each other. And there's one more long roof I can see quite easily that joins the two areas together. So I put that in and then just make sure it's got a vague edge. So it's given the start of the community, and I've put flat roofs in, but they are quite complicated in places, but you need to start somewhere. And there's another wall that's slightly lighter in colour. So there's nothing complicated. All I've done is painted rectangles, and I've got the semblance of a village. A distinctive feature is the old dairy on this island. That stands back a bit more and it's pointed. So I'm just going to stick a grey triangle in, and that gives me a landmark. Now the next thing I'm going to do is start at the top of the island with some dark colour and put in some very dark trees. So I'm mixing indigo and sap green and a little bit of yellow ochre just to lighten it up a bit. So these trees are quite bold, so I need to put them in with a few definite brush strokes. They're quite curved on top, so I'm just doing them coming down, leaving gaps between them, and then one on the far corner, coming round, going down, and then going further down. Now I need to loosen the edge. Just use some water. And then I've got more foliage that's not so dark, so I'm just going to put some yellow ochre in and then move it. I'm still using the small brush at this stage. Then it comes round to the same sort of dark again, but I want to just change the colour, so I'm just going to add some chrome yellow to it. Any yellow will do. I'll just put in more shrubs. Give it a lacy edge. Just mix up some more paint as I go. The middle of the trees will probably be a different colour. They get more reflected light. And more sap green. Just drop in different areas of colour to show that there is a canopy of trees and shrubs. And they're not just a green patch of grass. And then somebody's had a very good go at getting a lawn. So more chrome yellow. Just because it will show up against the trees. And then as it gets seaward, it's a much harsher environment, so it's not such a wonderful green lawn. So I'm mixing all the colours together and just diluting them slightly, showing that there's something there, but it's more mixed planting. Different sweeps of colour to show it's going over rocks and different areas of the mount. Changing colours again. And then as it goes up, there's a path, so there's a darker area, so there's a gap where the trees are. So I need very dark again to go the other side of the path. I'm going to deliberately leave a gap and just do the way, paint the trees the way they're hanging onto the hillside. And the same here. And then as they go up, a slightly different variety. And then back to the bottom again. A little bit more to the beach area, which has got something like phormiums or spiky plants growing up. So I'm going to use a rigger and a richer green. So I'm adding to the existing mix I've already used on the mount. I'm adding yellow ochre and a little bit of blue that's left over from the sea, and doing upward strokes. and going back with just yellow ochre on top, just to give them a bit more definition. There's lots of other plants growing in amongst them. When you're doing this, you try and keep the brush at a steep angle. Give a better line to the foliage. And then on the left hand side I've got other things growing, so I'm just mixing all the greens together. And again, keeping the brush fairly upright, just dropping them in. A little bit more water. Just add another layer with a slightly weaker paint. And that gives a nice foreground. I'm just going to break up this area a little bit. That leads you into the picture. So whilst that's drying, I can go back to the village. I'm now going to add a little bit more detail to the building on top of the mount. And I've rubbed back some of the pencil lines that I put in initially, just to give me a starting point. Now, there's lots of detail on it that isn't visible at this distance, but what you can do is colour changes. So I've got quite a dark colour, which I've mixed with indigo and yellow ochre. I'm just adding some burnt sienna to it. And the sun is only coming from the left. So I'm putting on details on the right. Well, it's not really details, it's just a colour change. If it's that far away, all you can really do is indicate a colour change. And that should do the job for you. And there's lots of different roofs and things and dark windows, but we're looking at it from so far away, all you can do is just give a hint, and the dark areas will make the light areas jump out a little bit. And there's lots of areas here that you can't quite make out, so what we'll do is just put down a few mixed strokes. And then halfway it's slightly lighter colour. So now I'll get the slightly lighter mix, which I've just added Naples yellow to, and go in with the lighter areas. And there's a few chimneys and things as well. But just trying to give the shape of the building. So the chimneys just need one dark side. So just using the side of the brush, counting them off as I go. Try not to make anything too definite if you're not sure. And then there's areas of rock sticking out that are quite dark. So now I can move on to the buildings on the harbour. Again, they've got the sun hitting them from one side and a wall that's very dominant with the sun. And then they've got roof lights, and the sun's hitting those from one side, and chimneys. So I'll start with the chimneys, and then the roof lights, just doing a blob each side for indicate a triangle roof. And then there's more foliage in the middle, so I've got the dark mix. I'm just going to add some chrome yellow to it and just put that in. And then above it, just a little bit of the Naples yellow. And again, I've got more roof lights and some little cottages. So I'll just do little triangles again, but if you're not sure, don't do too much. And then slightly more shadow to indicate a difference in area, that there's a boathouse or something here and a dark area. And then got several different roofs, so just do those in rectangles. And buildings changing direction. Best thing to do is get some water on the brush and go over the whole lot. Merge it in happily. And the same with this building on the end here. Now the wall is in fact much darker. So I'm just going to put some paint on the brush and go along the length of the wall. And then come down, bring the paint down a little bit. What I can do with the building here is just put a dark line under the roof. Now some of the buildings have got lichen on, so I can use something bright like Indian yellow, or you could use yellow ochre or raw sienna, anything you like, and just put a few dots on some of the buildings just to show that they've got seaside characteristics. And that again lifts the building slightly from the rest of the area. Now the buildings in the background, I could now go back with some of the green and just go round the edge of the villages that I put in. Wet the brush, just take the paint back a little bit from the buildings. Try not to leave any joins. Do it seamlessly. Well, that brings the buildings forward a bit. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and you'll go to Mounts Bay yourself soon. Thank you very much for watching.